Okay, so I'm saving my work at this point because I have done a base color layer on top of a sketch. What I can do now is I can turn on my shape sketch layer. You can notice how soft that was with just a typical brush. And turn on my base color layer on top of that. And you can see how the base color, because of the custom brush, gives it a lot more kind of character. I can see the direction of the strokes. And because each instance of color is at 100% opacity, it really kind of holds its character. If I blend them together using opacity, it can look really weird and not as strong. So that's why we need a base color layer. The next phase is to do a refined paint layer. So I'm going to lock this, the base color, make a new layer, call it refined paint. And this is where you start shaping and finishing off, or getting close to the finish for the final painting you want. So for the head is obviously the focal point of my pet portrait. And I have some nice references of my cat Bigby's head. And I especially like this one. So what I might do, just because I'm going to focus on finishing it in that area, I might go to this reference layer, unlock it, grab this head with my lasso, get all of his whiskers and everything, duplicate it, and move it so I can be zoomed in on the head as I'm working on it. There it is. So refined paint means that you're kind of zooming in more than with the base paint, and you are focusing on certain areas, and you are working on it at lower opacities. I can also use image adjustments to kind of clean up my reference a little bit, sharpen it up. I can even use a sharpen filter just so my reference looks a little bit cleaner, especially with like the open mouth. So now I want to paint this head like that reference, right? So how do I do that? First, I lock my reference. You only have one layer unlocked, and that's the layer you want to paint on. So this is going to be the refined paint. I'm going to use the same paintbrush, but I'm going to use it at a lower opacity. That way it's going to start blending with itself. And every once in a while I'm going to use some of these weirder colors too. And how do we get started? So I'll just zoom in a little bit more. A helpful tool for when you're doing refined painting is called the Navigator tool. So if you go to Window and you turn on Navigator, this is a little tool. I can make it bigger. And kind of free floating. But this allows me to move around while I'm zoomed in very easily without having to hold down spacebar. And it also shows me what the big picture looks like, right? Which is helpful at this page. It also allows me to zoom in and out with more levels than just Command plus and Command minus. So I'm going to start painting. I hold down Option to grab a color, and then I start painting with it. Now this is over the top of my refined paint, so I'm not in danger of erasing anything I've done, right? This is what my refined paint layer looks like. My base painting is underneath it. So I get to kind of freely experiment and refine, like the eyelids. And we're not hoping for perfection from these. This is just introducing us to this technique, which can be very frustrating at the beginning, but with practice becomes easier and easier. Put in some of his whiskers. And I'm just using Option a lot to change colors. Not quite getting his eye shape right, so I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And now when I'm layering it with this lower opacity brush, I'm able to get new colors, right? And I'm able to show kind of the light reflecting on the skin or on the fur. The hair and the ears. And then the direction of my marks is really going to matter too. And again, instead of erasing, you just paint with a different color. Yes, so this is where the refined paint comes in. To blend, you're using it at a lower opacity. So because you're using it at a lower opacity, that creates colors in between. So if I want to get, let's say, blended from this color to this color, right? How do I get there? Well, I can paint this color at the lower opacity. I'm at 63% on this color. That gives me a tone in between, right? Then I can use that between tone and paint that in. And I just keep getting mixes of the two that I can keep painting with to blend them. Now, I like doing it with this kind of hard edge brush first, right? The one I created. But then the technique for really smoothing it, if you want like very, very soft edged, which I pretty much don't do until the very end if I want it, is you're going to use the smudge tool. And what the smudge tool does, and you can use it with any brush, but it just pushes and blends just like if you were smearing it with your finger. But you have to have the pixels down first. Does that make sense? So it's very different than digital coloring, right? So I like to keep everything with my custom brush, you know, very kind of hard-edged, but broken up at the edges because that's how I designed the brush, and blending just using the colors. But then you can always use the smudge tool to physically blend the pixels and soften the edges if you want. So when I zoom in on this, you can see all this kind of layering is blending those colors together. Because each time I paint, it's giving me a low opacity of it. All right. And that's what we're going to do for today's progress. So if you can try to get your base color painting ready so that we can start on refined painting next class, I think we'll be in good shape. And then next class, we also start our final project. So you can find that theme under assignments. And we get to be pretty creative about it. I'm going to show the open mouth here. Tooth. Open jaw. So a lot of this refinement can happen on your refined paint layer. But I'm still not very zoomed in. I'm only at 50%. So it's still just rough detail, but kind of refining your shapes and your composition. And it makes a big difference. This is it without it, than with the refined paint. And what I love about this project, why we do it at the end of the semester, is everyone's digital painting is just going to look very, very different. Because we all have different tastes and tendencies when we try to represent something, whether we're abstracting it or not.